This is the Way to Go podcast. Bill McMinn, Eric Barfell here with you today. So both, in case you don't know, I'm sure most of you who listen to this know we're pastors at Dingleville Bible Church. So we want to talk, since Eric's a youth pastor, I figured we'd talk some youth stuff in this segment. And I was thinking about building just character, building a good foundation under life. Because I've thought about it so many times in some of the teens that I've seen. If you have a teenager who builds a good foundation in their life, they do the right thing, they're disciplined, they have character, they work good at school, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It just seems better like when they build the house. It's kind of like in your teenage years, you're laying a foundation for the rest of your life, and then you're going to kind of build on that foundation you're laying. It's good to be square right from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things like building a foundation takes time. Right. You don't build a foundation by doing one thing every day for 1 week. Right. Like that's more like habit or whatever at that point. I mean, when you build a foundation, you've been doing it this way for years. Right. So it kind of reminds me of the thing. It's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Right. Second best time is right now. Right. That kind of thing. Like the sooner you start, the better that foundation is going to be. Or I guess the sooner you start and keep at it, the better and stronger that foundation is going to be in the long run. Right.
I mean, anecdotally, I was saying surely nothing I've done research on or study. It just seemed to me, if I look at my own family and my own brothers growing up, I always lifted weights and exercise in high school. So I would get up in the morning. It would still be dark out sometimes, and I'd work out most days before school. My dad had like some, basically a bar with some weight and some dumbbells and a bench. And that's what I would use. And then they threw me down in the basement after a while. That was in the living room. And then they threw me down in the basement after a while. And I would always do it. My twin brother never did. Yeah. He never, when we left high school, he never went into really doing any kind of exercise. I always stayed with it because I was into that going forward. And I think that's true of some people who play sports, some people who are just into certain things. They just kind of continue on because they've got that foundation. Or you see sometimes with families, if you have certain things that the family does, you see it carried on by some of the kids later on because they laid a foundation.
Yeah, no, I think for us, I mean, going to church, I mean, my dad was a pastor, so it wasn't really a choice per se, but I mean, that's something we always did every Sunday morning. But also, like, when it was nice outside, we got outside. Right. We weren't watching TV that night. We were going on a bike ride or walk or whatever as a family. At some points, we moved around a couple of times, but like in the Cleveland area where my parents currently live, there'd be tennis courts close by. We all owned a tennis racket. I don't know if everyone owned a tennis racket when they were a kid, but like we'd go play tennis, hit the ball around. Like, so when it was a nice night, we would always take advantage of it. Right. I feel like I still do that because like, when it's raining, it's like, it's not that nice. But when it is nice, no, we're going outside. Right. Hey, even now it's like, hey, let's just go eat dinner on the porch or whatever. Hey, let's just like hang out outside or, whatever. Right. Always take advantage of that nice day.
Right. Because I feel like a caged animal if I'm inside too much, to be honest with you. I don't like it.
It might be in part like the nice days just come so rarely too. So but maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, when we were kids, the way that we grew up too, and we'll get into some of the differences and changes in society today, but I would hear always from my mom, get out of the house. We were always sent outside. If you wanted anything, you had to go earn it. So if I wanted a model kit, you didn't say to your parents when you're walking through the store, hey, buy me a model kit. It was $3, which $3 isn't a lot today, but back then it would take us probably 3 hours to earn that. And so we would go, every time there was a snow day, we'd be all up and down the street till dark. I'm not kidding. Like we would shovel. We get 50 cents here and 75 cents there. And we would just do it until we'd have enough money to go down to the local shopping plaza where they had a McCrory's, which they don't even have, I don't think, anymore. And we would go to the toy section and we'd buy model kits of ships or planes or cars or whatever we decided we wanted to do at that time. And that's how we lived. Yeah. So anything, if you wanted a car, if you wanted gas for the car later on, even in college, you worked for everything. You wanted a new pair of jeans, you wanted some cool clothes, you had to buy. Like I bought all my own clothes. This is how we grew up.
Really?
Yeah. My parents didn't have any money. We were poor. So I worked for a clothing store, and that's the only reason I was able to have decent stuff. And they would always try to give me a discount because I was like their only employee, basically. Gotcha. It was a dad and a son and me. And that's who ran that store. And then actually it got to the point when I was a teenager, like junior, senior, they would turn me loose with the whole store. And they would just walk away and say, we're going. You got the keys, shut it down when you're done. And they would just leave me there.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was kind of nice, actually. A lot of responsibility. But that's how we grew up, that if you want something, you had to go out and mow lawns, shovel.
How old were you when you got your first like real job?
I was probably 16 or 17 when I got my first real job.
Okay.
Everything before that, me and my buddies.
Mowing lawns.
Yeah, we'd mow lawns. We'd go down the street and we would just hand out little cards. We called ourselves Odds and Ends Incorporated. We didn't even realize you couldn't incorporate yourself. We just thought it was a cool name. So like we put incorporated. We're just teenagers. And so we would hand them out all up and down the street, and people hire us to paint their porch or whatever. We did anything that we could to get money together because that's just how it was for us. So of course, as you get older, that's your thinking. You know, no one hands you anything. You got to get out and scrap for it. But it also turned out we were a much less depressed generation. We were, because we didn't have time to think about all this stuff. Like you didn't sit in your room.
Right.
Thinking about yourself all day. You think about stuff when you went to bed. But until then, I mean, you were busy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you were always with other people. You're always riding bikes up and down the neighborhood. I mean, that's how I grew up, basically.
Right.
Well, when I lived in a neighborhood, I should say. Before that, I was in the country. But we'd play out in the woods, you know. It was me and my siblings going, digging into a creek, looking at crawdads, throwing rocks and stuff. You know, just like, I don't know, random kid stuff you do outside with your siblings, hiking and stuff. Other than that, no. When I lived in the Cleveland area, it was a lot more. I mean, we lived in an actual neighborhood at that point. So we would ride bikes. We'd go play tennis at these tennis courts. They built a skate park. You know, we were always outside doing something, I feel like.
But it built a pattern.
Yeah.
It built a pattern. And that's what I'm saying.
I still do all that stuff today.
Right. If you get good patterns established in the lives of the young people, and that's for parents listening for your children, maybe a grandparent for a grandchild, you as a youth pastor for your youth kids, you get them into good patterns of reading the Bible, seeking God. What I'm suggesting is these patterns can carry on. They can carry forward, good or bad, whatever patterns you're setting. So you want to have as good a patterns, as good a character early on as you possibly can. Now, one of the things that I looked up, because I was just curious about it, because again, every generation is different from the other generation, so it's nothing new. Like Solomon said in the book of Ecclesiastes, don't say, you know, these days were better, or ask the question, why were these days better than the old days better than now? You know, it's not wise to ask those questions. You know, we live in the day that we live in. But there was this woman, it was an article from the Atlantic, which I assume is a journal, a magazine. And so she did all this research on phones and their impact on kids. Now, this article is already 5 years old. I just pulled it up. It was one of the first ones that came up on Google. That's kind of, I don't know how the rest of your research stuff, but if I'm interested in something, I just punch it in. And maybe it's not Google. People are like, Bill, don't use Google, DuckDuckGo. You know, okay, it's probably DuckDuck, whatever.
I don't even know.
You know what I mean? Whatever it doesn't matter. But I put it in the search engine, and that's what came up. And so anyway, she was saying, she talked to this girl. She was interviewing all these teenagers. So there was a teenager, a 13-year-old. And here's the quote. She told me she'd spent most of the summer hanging out alone in her room with her phone. That's just the way her generation is, she said. We didn't have a choice to know any life without iPads or iPhones. I think we like our phones more than we like actual people. That's what the 13-year-old said. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Checks out with the current generation.
Yeah.
Even 5 years ago.
But isn't it kind of scary when you think about it? Let's say people, like they said, they're all literally leaving a dent in their bed because their whole world is in the phone. So when I'm thinking about all the problems with this, I'm thinking about, man, when I was a kid, we were running around bases all the time, playing kickball, playing baseball. We were throwing the football. We were running. We were biking. We were climbing through the woods. Like you said, catching crayfish when we were little, sledding in the winter. We were constantly moving, constantly outside, as opposed to a life living inside. Now, with the advent of CBs, the CB radios became a humongo fad. Everyone and their brother had, like you see big whips on the cars and big antennas by houses, and everyone had a CB. So we were real interested in that when we went to the beach one time, and my grandparents had a place down there. So we wanted to stay inside talking to all these people. on the CB, which really that's what we wanted to do. Like we just wanted to sit there and talk to chicks that lived across the river or wherever it was. So that's what we were going to do. And my mom and my grandma were like, oh no, well, we like to, we don't care.
Yeah.
Like you are not going to be in the house. Like this is an impossibility in summer for anyone in my generation. Like you are not going to sit in the house. Like you are going to get outside, which was great for us. And I personally look back on that and think there would have been no value gained by talking on the CB. There was a tremendous amount of value gained by fishing for flounder, going out and crabbing, bringing that stuff home, because this is what we would spend our days doing: swimming, crabbing, clamming, fishing, hours and hours and hours outside doing recreational things.
Right. Yeah. I had a teacher in high school. She was telling us one time, they finished up the school year. It was the first day of summer, and her dad unplugged the TV. And her sister they're just furious. They're crying. They're upset. She's like, it was the best summer ever.
Right.
She's like, I distinctly remember it just as being just awesome. Every day was so fun because we didn't sit around watching TV. And honestly, maybe this is just kind of my interpretation, my view of things, but people aren't fulfilled sitting there on their phone. Do they actually enjoy it that much? Not really, in comparison to being out and about, doing stuff with people, hanging out in person with their friends. But it's just so addictive and convenient and accessible. That's just what they do. So yeah, they just lay on their bed, they lounge around, they just scroll aimlessly and endlessly. Do they actually enjoy it compared to doing literally anything else outside with people, with their friends? I think they would much rather prefer that. But then you have to like make the plans. You have to get up. You have to drive somewhere. So it's like the lazy, convenient. That's what's most immediately accessible. Therefore, that's what they do.
Right. So maybe the desire to connect with people is a good desire. The mode of connecting with people through electronics does not work as well as people think it works, because I think it does lead to not being able to socialize. Like they say, some of these people legit, they'll go and they have a hard time talking to people. They have an easier time texting somebody than they actually have. But anyway, this lady said that 2012 was the dramatic shift. So 10 years ago, it was after the Great Recession, which officially lasted from 07 to 09, had a starker effect on millennials trying to find a place in a sputtering economy. But it was exactly the moment when the proportion of Americans who owned a smartphone surpassed 50%. Said that was a game changer. When over 50% of your population owned a smartphone. Now, it used to be like my kids, they couldn't have a phone until it became necessary. In other words, it was sports practices. They had to get hold of us. We let them have a phone earlier. I see kids now, like little kids with phones in their hands. Oh, maybe 16, 17.
Okay.
More in there. Don't use me as an example. I mean, every family's got to decide on their own when to do that. But 10, I mean, does a 10-year-old need a phone? I don't know, man. I mean, it seems.
I have my opinion. I'm not going to share it. But
no, go ahead.
No, I'm saying heck no.
Okay.
And you see, I mean, my wife being a kindergarten teacher, she's like, some of these kids have nicer phones than me. It's like, why do they have a phone at all? And it depends on, parenting style. Like, oh, my kid's not, going to take any sort of public transportation, aka a school bus, without me being able to reach them.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, you being able to reach your kid via phone is not going to stop anything going on that bus that's going to be going on.
Right.
And I think the phone, there's a lot of issues that come with that phone. Now, some ways they were saying, okay, well, also kids they're not out as much. They're not having sex as much. They're not drinking as much. Like the younger generation is actually doing all those things less. But they're also, along with those things they really shouldn't be doing, they're also not even hanging out. Like they're not even, like you were saying earlier.
There's less external problems. There's more internal problems.
I would say that's
what it is.
I think that's exactly
We're
true.
pushing the problems from the outside to the inside.
Right, because there's more depression then. And they go on to say these people are vulnerable. They said the more vulnerable even the millennials were. The rate of teenage depression and suicide have skyrocketed since 2011. It's not an exaggeration to describe iGen as being on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. Much of this deterioration can be traced to their phones.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful statement.
And when was this published?
5 years ago.
5 years. I mean, it hasn't changed in 5
Right.
years. If anything, we're just pushing people more towards social media, pages, organizations, things like that.
Yeah, it says
to pass
there is
information.
Right.
I mean,
there's compelling evidence that the devices we place in our young people's hands are having a profound effects on their lives and making them seriously unhappy. And they said a lot of it comes down to too, like now it's everyone knows if somebody's having a party and they weren't, I wasn't invited. You become more aware of that. Oh, they're having support. There's ways of now leaving people out and being cliques that aren't happening like in the circle, but it does happen on the phone. And so again, there's no real way. I just think I think it's a fake world. I think there's so much fake in this world. Now I'm going to get on my own rant. I think there's just so much of it that's just not real. You know, whether it's some of the photos people post or, you know, all this happy scene or people portray themselves in a way that's absolutely false. You know what I'm saying? Because they do it on social media. And I'm like, but there's no reality. Now, all the people that are really in, like I was talking in a sermon recently, anybody who's a true hiker knows the difference between a hiker and a non-hiker. Anybody who's you're a true cyclist.
Right.
You know the difference between pretenders. You know, if I were going to get out there and start giving lessons on how to ride a bike, you'd be like, seriously, Bill? I mean, you're riding a bike 5 miles a pop, 10 miles a pop. You don't even study. You don't, you know, you would know the difference, but anyone else might not. Like everyone else might take that as a because they don't know. I mean, anybody serious in it would know. But I think there can be so much fake. That's all.
Yeah. No, there was this new kid at youth group the other night, and I was talking to him. Where do you go to school? Who's your best friend? He's like, oh, my best friend. I don't really have a best friend. They turned out to be pretty fake. My 3 best friends. I said, oh, would they say the same about you? And he just kind of smiled. And he didn't really have an answer. It's just funny to me.
Well, it is kind of funny. It's like when you meet people in real life, like you want to warn people if you know them just through social media. Remember, when and if we meet, there's no filters. Like this isn't going to be a filtered world anymore.
Right.
This isn't going to be, you're going to be able to show me your best angle anymore. This is, you're going to meet in real life, which I'd much rather prefer. And I think that sometimes maybe, Eric, we just need to get out of that mode of connecting here and just question ourselves, how much am I connected here versus how much am I connected in real life? And am I valuing real life experience of just being out with somebody else and enjoying that? Because I think you're right. I would much rather be on a kayak. I'll always have my phone because that's how I record stuff. I'll make reels and videos and let people know what's out there. But while you're out there, I mean, you're having conversations. You're not sitting there. I don't look, when I'm out kayaking, I'm not looking at social media.
Right.
I might take a picture with my phone. I'm not looking at social media. If I'm hiking, typically I'm not looking at social media. You're busy doing other things. And I think those other things are much more beneficial than, you made a great point earlier, like mindlessly scrolling.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is just my opinion, but you ask people, are you fulfilled when you're on Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, as long as you are you fulfilled?
Right.
Let me know what they say.
I don't know. What would they say? I mean, would they, I don't think they would be. Maybe they would lie about it.
Well, I guess, versus being with your friends.
Not when you're hearing of talk of parents putting their kids on antidepressants. Seriously, there's 4 more now in our day. There are way more people. And I mean, 4 times at least more people on antidepressants than there were. Huge amounts of our society are taking them. Is this a mistake? I mean, because in my day, you didn't hear about the stuff. Like we weren't worried. We were busy surviving, honestly. Like we were busy making it. We were busy getting wood to heat our house. We were busy making sure that we were going to be able to be okay as a family. Like there were doctors. Even that, dude. I mean, I'd have earaches, felt like my ear was going to blow right out of my head, and try to get your parents to take you to a doctor. I remember when I was a kid, I went to the doctor myself. Like, I had to go to the doctor because the end of my finger was hanging out because it was smashed under a car door.
Oh, sick.
I had to take myself to the doctor. That's how my life was. You walk your own self to I went to the emergency room and walked out because they wanted me to have an x-ray, and I knew I had to pay for it out of my pocket. And because I had to pay for it out of my pocket, I said, do I need it? Well, no. Even if I said, if every bone in my little end of my thumb is crushed, is this x-ray going to help me? No. I said, because there's nothing you can do, right? Right. But we're still not going to attend to your finger. So I walked out. I was in so much pain within 24 hours. I remember walking away at where I was working, going to some doctor that was in a house next to a plaza, some old doctor showing him my finger. He heats a paper clip up, drills it, gets all the blood out of it. I bet you like hearing this story.
Sick.
And I said, what about the end of my finger that's sticking out? He goes, it'll fall off. That's what he said. This is life in my day. There's no... Everyone has medical insurance. There's no, you're on your own, dude. I mean, I'm a 16-year-old. I'm very much 17, 18, whatever. I'm very much on my own as far as getting myself to a doctor, as far as buying my own clothes. This is the way I live. Again, you're not on social media. You don't have time to think about that kind of stuff.
Right.
So not that we didn't have our problems, but here's some of the things that they say before we close off this podcast. Bottom line is, these young people, the social life is their phone. They're spending less time hanging out with other humans. I think that's a problem. And screen time is directly tied to depression. More phone equals less happiness. Less phone equals more happiness. That's a fact. I think that's a good place to park this bus and just say, there it is. The more time you see that kid on the phone, know this, parents, less happy that kid's going to be. And the less time they're on that phone, the more happy they're going to be. Yeah. These are facts. These are not, we are not making this up. This is not pretend world. These are the facts in this world in which we live right now. Get off that phone. Or at least limit your time. I think for all of us, it'd be a good policy. I'll give you the last word, man.
Yeah. No, you have to be able to subdue it underneath you. I know. I get, we got to have it for work, for whatever, this, that, the other thing. Sure. But like when you don't need it, you have to be able to separate yourself from it.
Right.
You have to have those boundaries and you have to abide by them. I mean, also when it comes to giving your kid the phone, sure, it's up to you 100%. But at the same time, we have years and years and years of research and studies, and we know that there are a lot of negative health effects, negative health issues, I should say, directly linked to it. So like the Bible says, you got to count the cost before you do it.
No, I agree.
You got to count the cost.
So think about it. Food for thought. You all have a great and a blessed week.